I am not intimidated. I'm not afraid. I actually very much welcome the opportunity to talk to our politicians. That the entire process has been such a learning process for me, to be in our state capitol and to talk with our representatives and our senators. I welcome that very much. And because they work for us. I mean, they
absolutely.
represent us. So
it's in the name.
I almost feel like they should be a little bit intimidated, to be quite honest, because
that's the spirit. I like that.
I'm bringing a lot of information. And so the only thing that really stands out to me is I try to put myself into their perspective. So anytime I'm talking with anybody, a business owner, somebody who's, running a large nonprofit, politicians, families, I try to put myself in their shoes.
Hey everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul. We're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast, where we discuss the ongoing lives and issues of people with developmental disabilities to spark positive change in the field.
And we have a lot of fun doing it.
If you're looking for top-notch professional painting in the Toledo area, check out AB Perfectionist Painting. They're Better Business Bureau accredited, fully insured, and waiting to help make your home and business shine with a fresh coat of paint. We use them right here in the Friends for Life studio, so we feel confident in this recommendation. Follow them on Facebook at AB Perfectionist Painting or call 419-906-1627 to get started today.
Well, Jennifer, thanks for coming in this morning. You're our first podcast guest here in Montgomery County, and we're very excited to talk to you. We've heard amazing things about the work you do, and nobody said anything bad yet, so that's a good sign.
Well, let's keep this going.
Yeah. So you do work with changing spaces. You're trying to get things going, get adult changing spaces in pretty much every rest stop in Ohio, lots of other places. Why is that important to you? Because that's like a very, very specific goal.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And thank you for having me. I appreciate anytime I get a chance to talk about this. So my son Matthew is 22, and I literally changed him on the baby changing tables till he was probably 4, and which is way too long. And when he was when I couldn't do that anymore, then I changed him in my van. Parking lots. It's cold, it's hot, it's raining, wheelchair sitting in the rain, have to put him in a wet wheelchair, which is just crazy to me. So I went to, I was a teacher at the time at the Dayton Regional STEM School, and I went to my government teacher and said, I need to make a law. This was when he was 14. So I have no place to change him in public, and that's a huge problem. I'm sure there's nobody else that goes out in public and says, well, I'm just never going to use the restroom.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that this is something that people just don't think about, because I would have never thought about it before Matthew. So we actually took this to our students because we are project-based learning. And students, we worked with Senator Peggy Lehner, and I had different people from different disability organizations come in and talk to the students, introduce them to what the world is like with disabilities. And we kept going from there. We've had 3 bills in the Senate and the House, the Ohio Senate and House, that have all failed.
Welcome to politics.
Right, like it's scary because I've seen personally how these things can start and they fizz out. So I'm sure like that's something that you were dealing with.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. But failure is not horrible. Failure brings something to the table. So when we're not moving in the direction we need to, then we re-vector, and it also brings in other people. So the best thing that happened with this was in 2020 was our last bill that was in both the House and the Senate. Fizzled. Obviously, COVID hit, and then both Representative Rick Perellis and Senator Peggy Lehner termed out, so they were gone. However, the International Code Council got in touch with Senator Lehner's office, and she put me in touch with them, which was one of the best things that could have ever happened. And so for the last a few years I've been working with them. We wrote code. We wrote the specifications. I was fortunate enough to be on the committee that did intense research for a year and a half to figure out, what does this table need to look like? Where does it need to go? What space do you need around the table? And it will be in 2024 International Building Code.
Yes.
Wow.
Which sounds wonderful. And like, okay, great, they're going to be across the country. No. So the next step is every state in the country has adopted building code, but you don't have to adopt a particular building code. So, for instance, Ohio, I believe, is on 2018, and they don't have to go in order. So now you have to petition your state to adopt this language. The really cool thing is it's not even out yet, and we have already petitioned Ohio, and Ohio is fully on board. I have no reason to think this isn't going to happen, but it does take about a year. So it looks like we are going to get Ohio to adopt this building code for 2024. So what that means is it will be a requirement for any new construction. And it is particular places, but we're talking rest areas, museums, hospitals, school auditoriums, any place that has a certain amount of required water closets and toilets already. But the point is that it's making big change. And why did I get into this? Well, because, I have worked very hard, my family and everybody around us has worked very hard to fully include Matthew in the community. There wasn't any reason he shouldn't be a part of our community like any of the rest of us. Right. It's not an easy task. It makes such common sense, but it's not easy. He was fully included in a Catholic school. I started a nonprofit so that we could have funding for that to happen. And then he's been fully included, with his brothers and all the work we've done, all the activities we've done. But the lack of changing tables is the only thing that has gotten in the way of that. So now there are places that we don't go. I cannot tell you the last time we traveled. Just to go from Dayton to Columbus, that's an hour and 15-minute drive. Then whatever the activity is, another hour and 15 coming home, taking a real chance. We could step out of the door and have to turn around and come home because I'm not going to let him sit in soiled clothes. But he is to a point, and he's not even that large, but he's to a point where I can't change him on a floor. I can't pick him up. I can use my van. It's extremely difficult. It's not safe. I'm 51 and the body's starting to, the back, when you've been lifting a person for 22 years, it starts to take its toll. So, this, like I said, is the only thing that's ever restricted us from full inclusion, and it's not okay. It's not acceptable, and I won't stop.
Yeah. Do you find that it's intimidating to go in front of like the legislature and these big, what people often do are these big, powerful people in the American system, or do you find it just part of what you do just because you're pushing so hard advocating for your son? Because outside of the podcast that I do here for my job, I also do a lot of like wildlife advocacy and stuff, and it all is the same thing. It's going up against these people that have the power to say yes and no to the things you're passionate about, and it can be like overwhelming to think about, but also you're just doing it. So at the same time, you're just like, I don't know. I think people think it's more. The point I'm getting is I think people think it's more difficult or hard than it actually is when you're just going full speed ahead. That's a long question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's fine. And you're right. I am not intimidated. I'm not afraid. I actually very much welcome the opportunity to talk to our politicians. That the entire process has been such a learning process for me to be in our state capitol and to talk with our representatives and our senators. I welcome that very much, and because they work for us. I mean, they
absolutely.
represent us. So
It's in the name.
I almost feel like they should be a little bit intimidated, to be quite honest, because
That's the spirit. I like that.
I'm bringing a lot of information. And so the only thing that really stands out to me is I try to put myself into their perspective. So anytime I'm talking with anybody, a business owner, somebody who's, running a large nonprofit, politicians, families, I try to put myself in their shoes because that's the only way I'm going to get anywhere. If I go to them with, what's important just to me, I'm not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to come from their perspective of why would they say no to this? What is their skin in the game? What is it that they need to know in order to make the change? And truthfully, I have to say, I get kind of frustrated. I go in with the idea that they just don't know, benefit of the doubt.
Right.
But then when you go in and you go back and you go back and you go back and they say, yeah, it's a great idea, and then there's no action.
Yeah.
That's frustrating to me. And so I have to work on that within myself to deal with that frustration, overcome it, and keep pushing. And creativity, you have to be creative.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate because I am a part of this Changing Spaces organization that is national and is just growing so much right now. It's pretty cool. I am a co-lead of the Ohio chapter, and my partner, Kim Bolter, is amazing. We haven't even known each other for a year, and I just started up that basically Changing Spaces does a lot of our work through Facebook.
Gotcha.
Everything is posted on Facebook. We share everybody's, successes and challenges, and we share it across the country as soon as it happens. When I started the Ohio Facebook, Kim got in touch with me right away, and I'm so glad because she is a powerhouse, and she's creative, persistent, and she really pushes me. And I, because I've been doing this for quite some time, and you do it for a while, and then life is busy.
Yes.
So to try to keep up with it as much as I'd like to, I just haven't. So I'm very fortunate that Kim has become my partner because she pushes me like nobody else.
We need those kind of people in our lives. That's kind of what Paul does for me.
Somebody to wake you up at when you're supposed to leave for a podcast in the morning.
He's not going to let me live this one down.
No, he's not.
Real quick question that I always wonder: when you have a child who has a developmental disability, it changes you from everyone that I've talked to. Can you explain, how did that? What was it like when you got that first call, that first understanding that Matthew was going to be different? This life that I was particularly invested in one way in, now I have to be invested in an entirely different way. How was that?
The day we found out 17 weeks into the pregnancy that there was an issue with Matthew's brain. And we were immediately told, there's an issue. You're going to the room next door to get some genetic counseling. We don't think this baby's going to survive. And you always have that option to terminate. So that's the information we were given. Immediately took out paper and pen and went to this room, and just really, you get numb. I was numb. I thought, you do immediately feel like I've just been put in a different position. But in my heart and mind, I didn't know what that meant. But I thought, write stuff down, ask questions, even though I don't know, what questions. So it was a very numb feeling. It wasn't, I never really got that feeling of, my son isn't going to get married and have kids. And I don't think I ever mourned the life that he doesn't have. because I hear from a lot of friends that happens. But I just immediately went into, so how do I make this a good life? What is my responsibility? We were told so much that he wasn't going to live, quite honestly.
Wow.
All I wanted was that he would survive. And we didn't know till after birth that was what was going to happen. So my main focus was, how am I going to keep him alive? And right away went into, even when he was born and he was okay, and the roller coaster started, and that's where I started to learn about, okay, now I've got all these other roles. I have to work with doctors and hospitals and therapists, and the front door was just a revolving door. There were people in my house constantly trying to provide services, which is a wonderful thing. I've been in Montgomery County my whole life, and the support has been outstanding. Kind of put myself in a position, though. I'm very good about finding my experts, because I was an educator for 17 years. I did IEPs and special education. I always said I love having a team, because it's a lot of pressure to have to be the expert on everything. But I can find my experts, and then we can do what's needed. So that's kind of what I did. Was I surrounded myself with my experts, and his pediatrician was outstanding. I depended on her quite a bit. But when he was 3, she was only 40, and she unexpectedly passed. And I can honestly say it's probably one of the most traumatic things that's happened, because I remember very distinctly getting the call, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel like she was teaching me to ride a bike, and I'm not there yet, and now she's gone. And so that was almost scarier than the very beginning. But I quickly found that I think she taught me. She didn't just do it; she taught me, and I take those skills in our daily lives to this day, and always will.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have that.
Yeah, a lot of people do not have that kind of rock.
Making sure that individuals are reaching the goals they have set for themselves. That's one of the many goals of Assured Health Services. If you're looking for a residential care provider or searching for ADS services, Assured Health is your go-to place. Assured Health, helping others succeed. Learn more at assuredhealthohio.com or call 419-442-8066.
Yeah, and so, a lot of people, when they find out they have a child with a disability, they end up having a really tough time navigating this whole county board system and getting services. Kind of sounded like it wasn't that difficult for you in some ways. Is that true, or is that just because of who you are as a person? You just went out and figured out what you needed to do? Because we've talked to a lot of people that were like, I don't know what to do. I'm just like floating aimlessly.
And I get that. And I think that's why that I love to talk about this, and why my life has changed quite a bit. As an educator before Matthew, before any of my kids. And then, when he was born, I took 8 years off, and I went back and got my master's in special ed. And so then I advocated all through education, worked with families, loved working with families because of that, because I had the support, and I had these ideas. So if I can pass those to other people so that they can have them, and even get them in an easier way, that's my goal. And now, Matthew's an adult, so now I'm trying to navigate this adult world. But I worked really hard to try to find my experts and my resources, but I will say, even so, it's overwhelming. I like it to a website. There's so many websites you go to, and you could spend all day long. You've got 5 titles at the top, but each of those has 5 to 10 titles, and so it gets overwhelming. And that's the system, and that's one of the things that I've been finding, is that even though I've been involved, coming into the adult world, I'm finding there's even more out here than I even realized. And so now I'm trying to navigate through that and try to make it, again, easier for other people. I'm a very visual person. You know, I like little charts and graphs and things but they need to be simple and give the information that's needed. I like, to go through and just try to navigate that way. So I try to bring that to others as well. And that's what's gotten me through. But I've been very blessed to be around very good people, and I search for them.
Yeah. And, like you said, there has to be tons of people going through the same situation, going restroom to restroom, wanting to take a road trip, wanting to take their loved one who has a developmental disability to locations that they can't do this. Do you have any kind of tips and tricks that they can use because 2024 is still a while away before these things can really get moving forward? So we're Think Now people. So how do you help others in the meantime? Do you have any tips that, hey, bring this kind of wipe, bring this type of layout, so on and so forth?
Yes. So that's the first thing that we did when we started the Ohio chapter of Changing Spaces was we put together how could we arm people? Right now, what's happening is people are changing individuals on bathroom floors, which I've never done with Matthew. Truthfully, I choose not to go versus taking that route, which
Gotcha.
I don't like either, but I don't use the bathroom floor. But people are using bathroom floors, their vehicles, but the biggest tip is just we have to advocate, we have to educate. And so what Kim and I did in the very beginning was we created documents and flyers, one-pagers. And every time we hear of what the challenge is, we create a new resource. So, for instance, we just met with the Ohio Department of Transportation. And what do they need to know? Well, they need to know what tables are there? How much do they cost? So Kim created a flyer that showed, as of January such and such, here's 8 different tables, here's the cost, here's the website. So we've tried to create materials, and we share those materials with everybody. So our biggest tip is to advocate. It's funny, I've got a little measuring tape in my purse, and every place I go into restrooms, and I look around, and I measure, and then I give materials to the folks that are there. But even that piece isn't as easy as it sounds.
Right.
You can go to bigger organizations and talk to their facilities people, and they have no idea what you're talking about. They've got tables in there, and they don't even know it. Kim was with her family at an airport, I think it was in Cincinnati, searched for the tables, never could find it, found out a week later that they actually had them, but nobody knew it. So the best thing is advocate, educate, leave materials with individuals, but then follow up. Because even putting tables in, so the county is one of the wonderful tasks that I have is that the county received funding, and Dr. Combs has chosen to put the funding into tables across Montgomery County, which is outstanding. And I get to work on this, which is fun for me, but. It's also been a learning experience because it's not easy to do. To go into a restroom that's already there to do a retrofit, it's almost impossible. It's very difficult to find places that have the space to do that. So then we hit new construction. So now we're looking at architects. If we could get to a large group of architects, because they're the ones that are designing, and if they know of this issue, then they can bring that to the designs. Same thing through Department of Transportation. They're going to redo, I think 23 or 28 buildings across rest areas across the state. And so that's what they're doing is they're drawing up their plans, and they're looking at could they just go ahead and draw them so that they could include the tables. So that's the way to do it. It's less expensive. It's much easier. But we've got to advocate and bring the materials.
I think that's part of the problem too with when you get things passed, say everything's going perfectly, the money's all there, it's good to go. People, when they hear that, they're like, cool, job's done. It's like, no, especially when it comes to the government, you have to make sure they're like actually spending the money on the right things and it's going to the right people. And like you said, coming down to the actual installing of it, like you can't just slap it on a wall and be like, cool, good to go. That's
right.
That's a huge challenge that a lot of people don't think about. So when you say there new construction in 2024, how quickly do you think that gets implemented? Because the government and state typically do not move very quickly when they do things. So
right.
Do you imagine this being like a 5-10 year process of like as things get built, or how do you see that going? Because everything's a process. Everything takes forever.
Yes, and I always say, Matthew, we're advocating, and we will continue to advocate. I don't think within our lifetime you're going to go out and every place is going to have one, but without starting now, and essentially at this point it's one table at a time, it's not going to happen. It's going to take some time. So when the Code Council came to Senator Lehner's office, the first question I asked was, why this instead of legislation? And the response was, well, if it's in building code, then somebody builds a building, they have to go through inspection and they have to follow code. So the building inspectors can enforce this. But with legislation, who enforces it? So you go into a building, and there's not a table. Well, it's upon me to then have to take that, put in a complaint, and go through that entire process against that building in order to get that to happen. So that's why the building code is good. So I'm hoping that it will move faster. It's going to take some time, though, because there's a lot of buildings that are going to be around for quite some time, and they're not going to be required. But that's also why we're taking the stance of, okay, so these are required, they're going to be required, but how about just educate? And how about you do this because it should be done? And
that's the most logical thing to really say.
It really should be done. And so, and it's about the people that you find, because working with Dayton Metro Library, and their person who is working on building the libraries, she is completely open, and it's like a breath of fresh air to find somebody like that, because often what happens is we find, say, a major department store chain, and we have had advocates in other states work for 3 years on a particular chain. Nope. We're going to put it in, and then it doesn't happen. And I'm finding that myself. As I always tell the folks around me, just because somebody says they're going to put one in doesn't mean it's going to happen. No. And truthfully, I'm waiting until it happens, and then I tell everybody, when it happens, I want the news there. It's going on Changing Spaces, so it'll go across the country. My partner has been working on this interactive map of the country, so she has been collecting from folks all over the country where these tables are. And so this will be an interactive website that will allow us to go to it. If I'm going to travel, I can go and find out where the tables are. Right. We're posting pictures, because that's another piece. A lot of times they'll say, oh, yes, we've got a table. And you get there, and it's too short, or it's fixed height. And, it needs to be height adjustable to be safe. So.
Yeah.
THS Remote Supports is clearly focused on improving independent living through dynamic and personalized services. Their systems have been carefully developed and perfected to ensure that everyone receives the best care through the least intrusive means possible. Located in Cincinnati, Ohio, they've spent over 20 years providing in-home supports to individuals with disabilities. If you or someone you know is looking for a remote service provider, go to thsrss.com or call 513-882-9088.
Very cool. Well, I think this would be a very good time for Tony to play a little game show.
And that game show is called Rapid Fire.
Oh, boy.
Sponsor insert here. Okay. Rapid Fire is a game show that we do, and we ask 3 would you rather scenario type questions. The quicker you answer them, the better it will be, but I typically go on tangents wondering why people picked what they picked anyway. So are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. Question number 1. Would you rather raise a cow and eat it, or cut down a tree that you grew from a seed? I know, right?
That's a tough one because I'm a tree freak. So cutting down a tree, just, I can't imagine.
Yeah, that sucks.
Okay, I'm going to say grow the cow and eat it. Yep.
Good choice.
Good choice. I mean, you got some steaks coming later. Would you rather swallow a single tooth or have a top row of teeth loose for a week?
Swallow a single tooth.
Yeah.
That almost happened to me on Saturday.
Uh-oh.
My crown fell off when I was brushing my teeth. And I was like,
It's supposed
well, that's not supposed to be there.
And lastly, would you rather be forced to sing a song in public or to dance on social media?
I love both of them. I guess dance on social media because I can dance okay.
Okay.
All right.
I love to sing, but I don't know that
Look at
people
that.
want to hear it.
We'll do it both. Just go to AGT or something.
We've had Tony sing on this podcast plenty of times, and nobody wants to hear that
Yeah.
ever.
It's Turalura. Yeah, I'm getting better.
No, he's not. But anyway, Jennifer, we really want to thank you for the work you're doing. I think advocacy is so important. Everybody involved in everything that we've done is really important. But like taking it to that next level and like fighting for people with disabilities on a political level, I think that's just the coolest thing ever. So we admire your work. And before we wrap up here, like, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing? And we'll share this in the show notes and all of that because it's just important. It's small stuff like this that really impacts people's lives. And it's just like, we love that.
Absolutely. So we have created a website. It's www.changingspacescampaign.com, and it is gorgeous. It will give you any information you need about tables, and it's from everybody's perspective. And we are very much into pictures and videos, so it has a lot of that. And then we are also on Facebook, Changing Spaces Ohio. That is also a good forum because we've also created training. So Kim and I did an advocacy training with a PowerPoint that is extensive. And as a teacher, I go, oh my gosh, that's not how you do PowerPoints. They need to be simple. However, the reason that we made it so extensive is that the thought was if you have to make a phone call, you can put this PowerPoint in front of you and you will have answers to any questions those people are going to ask so that you don't have to remember everything. So we have supporting materials. Those are the 2 main places. But that website absolutely is anything and everything anybody would need. And then you can always reach out to us. We have a Gmail as well, changingspacesohio@gmail.com. And we're on it. I mean, it's something that we work on daily. And we love to hear questions, comments, requests at any time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in this morning. And again, what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you.